Friends, to this Wednesday evening Dhamma discussion and meditation. And the subject of tonight, I was going to kind of go over the practice of the concentration or the Samata bhavana practices that we find within the Theravada tradition. Now, I kind of used this same subject in a program I did on Monday night on another Zoom program. I don't know how many of you had tuned into that or not. But, within the Theravada tradition, there are actually 40 traditional subjects given for developing developing concentration, even leading up to attaining the jhanas, the 40 different subjects for contemplation. And that doesn't include actually the vipassana meditation. Vipassana is considered under the category of developing wisdom. But in the overall framework of the Buddhist teaching, as we all know, the Buddhist teaching is centered on the Four Noble Truths. And the Eightfold Path is the way that we live, think, and meditate in order to realize especially the nature of suffering and the ending of suffering. And the Eightfold Path is divided into three categories of sila, samadhi, and panya. So samadhi means the mental calming. That's the prerequisite for being able to develop deep insights into impermanence, and especially of no self, in order to destroy the illusion of the separate ego and to attain really liberation of the mind. So the practices of samatha, usually those two practices of meditation within the Theravada tradition, we call samatha vipassana. So samatha means the development of calm abiding. And that's a prerequisite for developing deeper levels of insight. And so these 40 subjects of concentration are given in the Buddhist texts, especially in the Visuddhimagga. I'm just going to go over them briefly. Of course, the most popular ones that are practiced these days, of course, are the anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of the body, and some of the other ones. But a lot of them are not really practiced very much. But just for your, to cover the subject, I'm just going to go over these. Now, the definition of concentration. So the samatha meditation is the actual kinds of meditation, and samadhi is the result. So you gain samadhi by practicing shamatha meditation. And these 40 subjects for developing the shamatha or concentration. Before that even, I will just say that the definition of the samatha meditation or samadhi is the profitable unification of mind. So the profitable unification of mind. That means the state of the mind that's become one-pointed on a wholesome object as opposed to an unwholesome object. Because people can concentrate on maybe killing somebody, but that would be considered an unwholesome concentration. So these objects are all designed at helping to create the conditions to understand the Four Noble Truths and to develop the meditation practice, develop concentration and mindfulness. So some of these, the characteristic of the shamatha meditation is non-distraction. That means when you attain the calmness of mind, which means the concentrated state of mind, it's grounded in the present moment. It's kind of fixed in the present moment on your particular object of concentration. And it's not being distracted by the five hindrances. So the five hindrances are the main mental obstacles that block our mind from gaining concentration. I think most of you know what these five hindrances are. I've given talks on them before, and so have so many other teachers also. But anyway, there's a sensual desire. That means when just the desire to see, hear, smell, taste, pleasurable or beautiful objects, that desire for sort of desirable things to satisfy the senses. And so this comes up in meditation too. Maybe you're thinking about some sensuous desire, or thinking about going to your favorite restaurant, or playing music over in your mind. So the mind is always trying to seek out pleasurable sensations. And the opposite is the ill will. That means the aversion to unpleasant objects. And the mind is doing this also in meditation. You have aversion to pains in the body, so you're moving around and itching and this and that, or you're disturbed by sounds, you get angry if somebody making unnecessary noises and so on. So the sense, desire, and ill will, I mean, we exercise these in our external life, but in meditation, they also manifest to block our ability to concentrate. And then there's just the restlessness and worry. And this is usually worrying about things that you shouldn't have done, or worrying about things you did do that you shouldn't have done, worrying about getting caught or found out about, doing something unwholesome, or just basic restlessness, just not being able to settle down, always looking at the watch, what time was it going to be over? Wanting to, go do something else. So this restlessness and worry. And then sloth and torpor, that means physical and mental heaviness. That usually it's like that sleepiness when you start to nod out in meditation and, kind of going, either spacing out or go half asleep. And then the fifth of the hindrances is doubt. That means doubting whether you even have the, whether meditation leads to anything, or whether you have the wherewithal to do that, or doubting about some aspects of the teaching and so on. But anyway, so these five hindrances, these are the distractions, basically. But almost anything that's going to be a distraction come up in your meditation is going to be one of these five hindrances. And so they have to be dealt with and skillfully dealt with, and to apply their antidotes before one can effectively concentrate, because you're trying to focus on your breathing, and then the mind wanders after 5 seconds and get lost in thought or go to sleep, and you have to come back, and this could go on the whole meditation period with just getting very few moments of actual concentration in. Everyone experiences that. So anyway, so these are different topics of concentration can help to deal with some of those hindrances. Now, the 10 of these are recollections, where you kind of think. So there's a recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. That means you recollect the qualities of the Buddha. And I'm not going to go over those. So you can find them out in other texts, because it would take too long. So you recollect the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dhamma, and the qualities of the Sangha, in order to gain some faith. Also, that we need to develop the 5 spiritual faculties to help our meditation practice, to motivate us to want to practice. So And then there's a recollection of virtue, thinking how great it is not to be plagued by guilt, worry, remorse, and fear because you've done unskillful things and so on. The mind gets free from guilt, worry, remorse, and fear because you led a controlled and skillful life. And also to reflect on your generosity, the practice of generosity, and the recollection of death. And I'm not going to go over all of these because, again, it would take too long. But you can contemplate also the inevitability of death to overcome that fear of death, because that's also can be a distraction for people. And then contemplating the body, like the 32 body parts, in order to develop some detachment to the body and have less craving and desire for the body. There's in the mindfulness of the body practice, contemplating the 32 body parts, also mindfulness of breathing, and also the cemetery contemplations that you find in the last part of the mindfulness of the body in the Satipatthana Sutta. So this helps to see the reality, the impure or nature of things, in order to, all we normally see is the marks of beauty of objects, but we don't see how underneath that superficial external beauty, these objects that we're attached to are not all that beautiful necessarily. And then there's the 4 Brahma Viharas, are also popular meditation subjects to help to overcome, especially practicing metta. So if you have a lot of anger, you can practice the metta meditation, hopefully overcome some of those grosser aspects, especially of prejudices and ill will towards certain types of people, or people that have hurt you in the past, unfriendly persons, or so-called enemies. And the antidote of that is the practice of metta. So some of these preliminary subjects of the meditation are used as antidotes for people with strong accumulations of ill will or anger, or let's say sensual desire and lust. Then they may need to spend more time doing these other contemplations, so that when they sit down to, let's say, go deeper into the meditation, it will be much easier. So a lot of those other contemplations are designed at that, weakening some of the strong obstacles for the meditation, like doubts. So you gain confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, gain confidence in yourself, that every person has that ability to meditate if they really put their mind to it. So there's the Brahma Viharas of the metta, and then the meditation on compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Then there's also a meditation called the loathsomeness of food, for people that are strongly attached to food. One of these meditations is to see all the problems that overeating and eating the wrong kinds of foods can do to you. Make you sick and cause all kinds of problems, as well as other issues. So there's certain meditations would hopefully can help to overcome that strong desire for eating. I know there's a lot of issues around eating and so on, but that's another thing. And then there's also defining the 4 elements. So a lot of these practices you find in the Mindfulness of the Body Sutta itself in the Satipatthana. So mindfulness of breathing, the 4 elements, the 32 parts of the body and the cemetery contemplations are all found, these 4 samatha practices are found in the foundations of mindfulness. But the foundations of mindfulness themselves are not mentioned as specific topics in this list, because that falls under the development of wisdom. So, now, of course, the most common of the practices of the samatha are the practice of mindfulness of breathing, because that's probably the, we carry the breath with us all the time, and it's fairly easy to remember. But the problem is, if you still have a lot of hindrances, it's going to be difficult to focus and keep one's attention on the breathing. That's why these other subjects for contemplation are given for people to practice from time to time, especially if they have certain issues with certain of those hindrances. Then they can select some of these other practices, find out how to do them, and then use them until hopefully those strong hindrances are weakened. Now, some of these objects of samatha practice lead only to access concentration. So there's 2 levels of samatha. One is called reaching the level of access concentration, which the hindrances are largely weakened and suppressed, but maybe not totally. But at least they're weak enough that you're able to remain on your focus of concentration, let's say at least 75 or 80% of the time. The mind is, able to keep its focus on the object of meditation. And there's the occasional maybe wandering thought, but you catch it quite quickly. And so you don't get too long lost in the hindrances. So this stage of access concentration, also you start to feel the jhana factors such as piti and sukha, the rapture and bliss in weak stages come up as the mind gets more and more focused. So the access concentration is sort of called the first level of concentration. There's another level called the momentary concentration, but usually we talk about that when a person is practicing the vipassana. So, and then of course the jhanas, attaining the 4 jhanas, are the stages of the absorbed concentration. So some of these, the discursive topics like the Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, recollection of death, and recollection of foulness, or a lot of these only attain the access concentration or only the first jhana. And the kasinas, I didn't mention the kasinas, but there's 10 kasinas which are also objects of concentration, but these are not used too much anymore by meditators, especially in the Western world. Some monks in Thailand or Sri Lanka, certain monasteries, they still might practice these kasinas, but you really need to have the guidance of a teacher when you're practicing them. So basically it's the earth, fire, water, air, space kasina, and the blue, yellow, red, white, and light kasinas. But if people are interested, they can read the descriptions of these more detailed in the Visuddhimagga, which is a non-canonical Theravada text, but it's considered to be a very important source of the Theravada teachings, and especially of the development of concentration. And also in the development of this samatha, having the right conditions also is very important. And so we've been doing, of course, mindfulness of breathing, most of the guided meditations that I'm doing with you in these Wednesday evening programs. Usually, uses or begins and or continues with the practice of mindfulness of breathing, but while following the four foundations of mindfulness. So anyway, really gaining the mental composure or calm abiding is basically that state of where the mind has become grounded and centered in the body and is kind of more or less resting in the present moment without any of these distractions or hindrances taking over. And the mind becomes very clear and tranquil, but yet fully awake also. Because there's a danger when the mind gets too tranquil, it can sink and kind of space out. And so that's why you have to avoid doing that by exercising more mindfulness. I'll talk more about that later, or I've been talking about that so much in the past. So having said that much about these various types of meditations, I wanted to see if open it up to see if anybody has any questions about any of that, or it could be any other Dhamma questions that you might have. Nobody had written in any questions on the email, but if any of you have a question, feel free to, you could probably just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, I see Pradeep there. Go ahead, Pradeep. You have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. If one were to attain jhana and then go into vipassana, is it important to come out of the jhana before going into the vipassana practice?
Well, that is that's a difference of opinion. Different teachers, it could be a controversial topic, but different teachers may have different opinions about it. Now, some teachers, or a lot of teachers will say, yes, you have to come out of the jhana in order to practice vipassana. But I personally don't agree with that necessarily. It depends on how much you're in the one-pointed concentration. Now, if you attain the jhana and you just keep your mind fixed on the breathing and not paying attention to anything else, and just maybe, or get absorbed in the light that comes into the mind, if the nimita comes up, and you just stay focused in that, or if you're doing one of these kasinas where the mind becomes full of one of the kasinas, like the color kasinas or so, then no, it's not easy to practice vipassana doing that. And then you have to come out and you reflect on it. So there is a way that you can come out and then reflect on the impermanence of the jhana, but that's not really vipassana meditation. That's just reflecting on how the jhana is conditioned, and it's not the traditional development of the four foundations of mindfulness. So the problem is, if you attain the concentration and you kind of get stuck in that quietness, that we call that the trap of tranquility, then, and you don't want to go on to do anything else because you see it feels so nice, when you're having these jhana factors of bliss and sukha and joy. If you read the descriptions of the first jhana, the body feels like it's submerged in a warm bubble bath, and every cell of your body is drenched with that rapture and bliss of born of concentration. So a lot of people, they don't want to kind of come out of that and practice vipassana. So that's one of the dangers. Now, if you're practicing mindfulness, if you're practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and if you're following the scheme of the 7 factors of enlightenment, you can attain jhana and continue to meditate. Because if you read so many suttas, if you've read any of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya or other places, at the end of the Buddha describes going through the 4 jhanas. He said, abandoning the 5 hindrances, one enters and dwells in the first jhana. Then letting go of applied and sustained thought, one enters and dwells in the second jhana. Overcoming joy and rapture, one enters and dwells in the third jhana. Then overcoming, letting go of that joy or bliss, one enters and dwells in the 4th jhana. Then in the 4th jhana, he says, from the 4th jhana, one then bends one's mind toward the observation of impermanence. It doesn't say anything about coming out of the jhana. He said, from that 4th jhana, one bends the mind toward the destruction of the defilements. And basically that means you're tuning in to the impermanence. You see how quickly the mental states are just arising and vanishing, and you see the conditioning, and you're able to contemplate paticca samuppada in forward or reverse order, and you're able to see how the sense of the self and the ego gradually fades away. So these are the insights that you get from having reached that level of the jhana. And that says nothing about coming out of the jhana to do that. Now, again, other teachers may have different ideas about it, but you won't, you never, only if you're, the Buddha, where he says come out of the jhana, is if you're going to reflect on the jhana as an object of developing impermanence. But that's not if you're following the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So these are 2 different practices. If you're going to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that's a very specific method and scheme. And the Buddha said that is the direct way for attaining enlightenment. Attaining jhanas and then and eventually contemplating and going through all the jhanas, that's a much more difficult path. Not many people can do that. But anyway, these are, again, different teachers are going to have their opinions about it. So, so I hope that answers your question about that.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. Just one more quick question following on to what you were saying. During access concentration, the nimita arises. Would you advise not to focus on the nimita and to continue focusing on the breath?
I wouldn't focus on the nimita if you are trying to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And you don't have to come back to the breath, because by the time the metta has arisen, then you should be in a state where you don't need the breath anymore. You go directly into the body and observing impermanence. By that time that the metta has arisen, that means you weaken the hindrances to a certain extent that you can effectively then practice vipassana. The breath is still there, but even while the breath is there, you can notice other sensations and sounds as they are rising and vanishing very quickly. And this is the way that I've guided people through meditation so many times, that we use the breathing to weaken the hindrances so the mind becomes more clear, but not getting lost in the breath. And the breath doesn't become The breath is always there, but you're not just trying to focus only on it. The breath is there in the background, but the mind is open and alert enough to be able to perceive impermanence. You see the impermanence of each in-breath and out-breath, and you see the impermanence of so many different sensations coming and going in the body, because when the mind becomes calm, it becomes like a reflecting pool or a perfectly polished mirror that can notice so many things going on at one time. See, normally we can't do that because our mind gets stuck on different objects. So we can't notice a lot of things going on at one time because we're too busy reacting to certain things, or the mind is just kind of dull. But when the hindrances are weakened, and by the time you've attained access concentration, then the mind becomes like a well-polished mirror, or a reflecting pool of water that just reflects anything within the ranges of the senses. It sees how quickly things just arise and vanish in the body, the sounds, even your thoughts. So this is the way of developing the vipassana, or going on from the breathing to go directly into the vipassana.
Thank you, Bhante. I did notice that whenever the nimitta arises, or if you're in a jhana, you are not aware of the breathing at all anymore. It's like it's gone. I mean, you're obviously still breathing, you're alive, but you're not aware of it.
Yeah, well, that's not a good state for practicing vipassana.
Thank you, Bhante.
And if you've read the Anapanasati Sutta, mindfulness of breathing sutta, the breathing stays there up until the attainment of enlightenment. Because if you go through that, the 16 tetrads of the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the breathing, it says contemplating impermanence, breathing out, in, contemplating impermanence, breathing out, contemplating relinquishment, breathing in, contemplating relinquishment, breathing out. And so the breathing is still there even while you are contemplating impermanence, and while the mind is letting go and fading away, when the mind is no longer clinging, and until even up to the point of, just before attaining enlightenment.
Thank you, Bhante.
So this idea of losing the breath and all that you can do that, of course, but then you're going too much into the samadhi, and not, can get stuck in that. That's what happens to a lot of people. Is there any other questions out there?
Bhante, thank you for your teaching. I came from a different religion, so I don't understand a lot of it. But at the beginning, you always say,
Who's talking? I don't know who's talking right now.
Can you? This is Chris.
Chris, okay. I don't see your name on my screen. Okay.
Sorry. So since I'm coming from a different religion, I know in the beginning you always recite this Buddhang saranam gacchami and Dhammang saranam, and then and the other one I forget, but Sanghang. So the saranam means what is the, and then you recite it 3 times. Is it a significant?
I go to the Buddha for refuge. I go to the Dhamma for refuge, I go to the Sangha for refuge, and you repeat it 3 times so it sticks in your mind. If you just say it once, you might forget it, but by saying it 3 times over and over, it sticks longer in your mind. And that's why we're meditating. We're going to the Buddha because he's the one who taught the Dhamma. And then the Dhamma is the actual practices of the Eightfold Path and meditation. And then the Sangha are people that you can learn from and get inspiration from to practice, and so on. So that helps to, help to increase your motivation, and helps, can help a person stay focused.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Let's see, maybe there's something in the chat box. I forgot about that. Okay. Let's see if there's any questions in the chat box.
Hey, Bhante, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Stefan.
Stefan.
Yes, I have a question. You said that you can kind of be stuck in the samadhi as if there's some potential for it to be kind of like a bad thing. But I know Bhante always said that if there's one thing is that to be stuck in the jhana, I guess, is not a bad thing. It can never be a bad thing. But I'm just wondering what are the negatives? What are the negatives that can come from being stuck and attached to the samadhi?
Well, if you don't go on to develop the insight into impermanence and no self, then it can be just like a drug almost, you know. Why do people take drugs? Because they get high, right? And they forget about their problems. So when people are in a samadhi, if you do it only for that reason, but that's why, you know, before people practice, you know, they hear about concentration and the things that can, you know, you can experience in concentration and, you know, that have been talked about. And so a lot of people, you know, want to practice that but without developing the foundations and getting their mind, you know, ready for the practice. So anyway, getting stuck in what I call the trap of tranquility. Yeah, it's a pleasant abiding here and now, but if you don't go on to develop the insight into anicca, dukkha, and anatta, then it's not going to destroy the unconscious, the root of defilements. In other words, the root of greed, hatred, and delusion is deep within the unconscious mind. So I'll just give a brief example of this contrast between concentration and the vipassana. So concentration, by keeping your attention fixed, let's say, on the object, and somehow you're able to just suppress the hindrances. It's like pushing the head of a jack-in-the-box down into the little box and putting the lid on. So the head represents the ego and its defilements. So if you're successful in practicing the samadhi and attaining jhana, it suppresses all those hindrances and you experience these jhana factors of bliss and joy and happiness and deep tranquility. But if you don't go on to develop vipassana, when you come out of the jhana, it's like taking the lid off the box, and the head comes back up very strongly because of the spring, the compressed spring. So without practicing insight and attaining the paths and the fruits through developing the factors of enlightenment, then you're not going to be able to cut the root of the defilements. So practicing vipassana is like taking a pair of wire cutters and going down into the box and cutting the spring 1/4 away with the attainment of stream entry, another quarter away by the attaining the once returning, and another quarter away by attaining never returning. That means each time you're gaining deeper and deeper insights into no self and destroying those the root of the defilements. If you don't do that, then you could go on your whole lifetime practicing samadhi and attaining jhana, but not accomplish that. Right. If you're doing it just for that purpose.
So can we count that just in a natural process that the mind will sort of get detached to it, just like from the first jhana, it gets detached from the thoughts going on in the background, and the second jhana, it gets detached to the rapture, and gradually all those things sort of fall away naturally. And then at the last stage, there's really nothing except just equanimity. So will the mind just naturally get disinterested in in those aspects of the jhana over time, or do you have to actually need to force your mind to sort of let go of them?
Well, I would say that probably depends on the person and the amount of understanding that you have about the practice. But if you read the sutras, I mean, the four foundations of mindfulness, that is the practice for attaining enlightenment. I don't know why people are getting stuck on all these, just wanting to attain jhana, jhana, jhana. But yeah, you need to have the jhana, but you have to go on and develop insight into no self. If you're too equanimous, you may not. You need the equanimity, but that has to be balanced with the mindfulness and the energy, and so on. If you look at the 7 factors of enlightenment, you should read those. It's very clear. And that concentration is actually attained as the 6th factor of enlightenment, not at the beginning of it. It starts with mindfulness, investigation, energy, rapture, joy, and then you attain concentration, which is the jhana. But by that time, you've already been contemplating impermanence. It's called vipassana jhana. So you can attain the jhana while practicing the vipassana and attain enlightenment. That's the way that of the the vipassana method normally is. You're developing this vipassana jhana.
Great. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, friends, I think, well, there was a chat here. Okay. Could one become insensitive to contemplation of death after some time? I seem to have lost the fear of death, and it's not motivating me to intensify the practice, as my mind tells me death is simply another challenge. How do I use Marana Sati to my benefit? Of course, people could become insensitized to death, but it's mainly Marana Sati is used to overcome laziness to practice. Now, if you have a good practice and you're practicing diligently, then you may not need to, keep on doing Marana Sati all the time. But it's a time when people, they realize that death can happen at any time, and how much defilements are still in your mind, and you haven't been convinced of it yet, or the danger of having your mind full of defilements when you die. Then the next life could be unsure, uncertain, and so it's for that reason. It's to overcome the procrastination to practice. But if a person already has a good practice, daily practice, and is making progress, and then necessary to do the Marana Sati, maybe not so much. So you might have to find some other way to motivate yourself if you become that. If the Marana Sati doesn't work in your advantage for that way, then you'll have to find some other way to remotivate your practice. Can you please elaborate more on Vipassana meditation? There's not going to be enough time in this program to do that. I might do that in another one, but I've so many talks I've given on Vipassana meditation. I would recommend going to our YouTube channel, the Lion of Wisdom YouTube channel, and going through the list of, go back and you'll see many talks on 4 foundations of mindfulness, the insight knowledges, which is the Vipassana meditation, and so on. And even the guided meditations that I do after these talks is based on that, developing the Vipassana the Samata and the Vipassana too.
Bhante, I think the three characteristics of existence should be, contemplated too. I mean, in the beginning of one's development in Vipassana Samata, because then you get some sense to not get trapped in the jhanas.
Well, that's
um,
why a person should practice right understanding, develop right understanding, which is understanding of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Before, that's the first step of the Eightfold Path. Meditation is the fifth and sixth steps. So when
Right.
people neglect that, they just want to meditate. They hear about meditation. Oh, I want to meditate. And that's why they get into these difficulties, And so, the Buddha was very clear that it's step by step, the Noble Eightfold Path, the right understanding, right thought, and then that includes all of those aspects about these three characteristics.
Yeah, everything's connected. If you're mindful enough, and then you develop wisdom, that it's not wise to hang around in an anicca trap. It's either, Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, friends, I think we'll go ahead and finish up here, so that we'll take a short break, come back and do some yoga, and then try to develop our concentration and insights, hopefully. Okay? See you back in a few minutes.